Awesome. Well, glad to have you here. Talking a bit about Avalanche. And thanks, everyone, to our listeners here who want to learn more about Avalanche. Recently Furu Combo just launched on Avalanche, so we figured we have you on just to, teach our users or tell our users a bit about your network. Um, you know, the growth of the network, what challenges you face, that sort of thing. And then, yeah, I was mentioning earlier, we just have a Quest 3 campaign live. Users can go to that page or to our media, join us on the Twitter there, and then see how to partake in the Avalanche campaign. So, Matt, yeah, thanks very much for taking the time to be here. Maybe you just want to do a brief introduction on yourself. How did you get involved in crypto and Avalanche, and what was your background before you got into blockchain?
Yeah. My name is Matt Schmink. I've worked here at Avalabs for just about, I guess it's almost 10 months now. Time's really flown by this year. Um, yeah. Worked here for around 10 months and started off directly out of undergrad in traditional finance. I actually switched my major in undergrad. I have some programming experience because I was a CSE major for about a year. Um, I switched to finance about a year into undergrad and came out looking for a kind of a traditional finance career in either like investing or something in that regard, whether it be stocks, private equity, like VC related work, real estate, and I actually kind of switched my major too late to be like a summer analyst at like an investment bank or anything in that regard. So I originally accepted a position in a corporate finance role in their like leadership development program, all the while
Hmm.
getting my CFA. I'm actually on level 3 of the CFA. Um, and so that was around, I think I graduated, I guess, May of 2020 from undergrad. And I found really Bitcoin and blockchain sometime late in 2020, early 2021. And I've always kind of known about it. First heard about it during like the 2017, 2018 cycle in undergrad. A few of my teachers, my like investment philosophy teacher, who's actually talking about it, and he originally thought it was a bubble, but I'd like to hear his opinion now to see if he still thinks that. But yeah, so that was like when I first heard about it and started learning about it, I guess 2017, 2018. But I became an investor late 2020, and early 2021 is when I really kind of dove into the rabbit hole of kind of a generalized crypto landscape. First learning about what like blockchains are, what a permissionless smart contract blockchain is, kind of the different types of blockchains, what they specialize in, how oracles work, how DeFi protocols work, what are NFTs, different token types, really everything. And I just couldn't consume enough information. It was one of those things where I probably was spending the most amount of time learning about like blockchain and crypto and Web3 out of anything else in my daily life. So I was I originally actually started I went on chain early 2021, and Ethereum back then was like outrageously expensive, just mainnet.
Right, right.
And I my first experience was actually Polygon's POS chain during the liquidity mining program they had with Aave back in spring of 2021. And so I actually ended up moving over to Avalanche when Avalanche Rush was announced in August 2021, I think. Yeah, August 2021. Bridged my funds over, got on Benki, did the full kind of DeFi suite. And they didn't really have Aave back then on Avalanche. It was very basic primitives. Pangolin was actually the bigger decks when I first was an Avalanche user, and I think people like the UI of Trader Joe more, and that's kind of what made people gravitate towards Trader Joe. So from there, I was an Avalanche user first, and I really liked the chain experience. It was kind of the best EVM experience of any chain that I've really used, and kind of still is to this date. And at that point in time, during I guess autumn of 2021 or winter of 2021, I was like, all right, all your time's being spent learning about this in your free time, and you spend more time learning about this than like studying for the CFA or working. You might as well make this a full time career. So I started applying for jobs, had a few positions that I was interviewing for related to either like funds or actually like research positions at research companies such as like Masari the Block. And I interacted with some of the Avalabs team on Twitter. And so it's funny, Luigi actually reached out to me. He said, "Hey, I have a position open on my team. You should apply." And I applied for it, and one thing led to another, and kind of here I am today. And that's how I kind of got the job at Avalabs and really made this a full time career. And it's one of those things where I couldn't have been happier with the switch. It genuinely doesn't feel like I'm working. This is like what I enjoy, and I love to read about it and be a user first. So it all worked out, and kind of a reason I chose Avalabs and Avalanche to work for. I wanted to work if I was working on a specific chain, I wanted to or like a specific network. I wanted to believe in like their long-term thesis. And I'm someone that's subscribed to the application specific blockchain thesis in terms of like how you scale, so more like a horizontal scaling approach versus vertical scaling. So
Right.
that really left me with like Cosmos and Avalanche were the two that I would have like want to work for. Um, and I ended up choosing Avalanche just because I already had the connections with the team. I loved the user experience. I was a user first, and everything just felt right through the interview process. And I, like I said, one of the best decisions of my life.
Oh, that's an amazing story. Yeah, thank you for the detailed breakdown there. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think anyone who's, I myself, started, taking studies in traditional finance and economics and stuff like that. And when you're going through it, you're not kind of sure. I think the more you study it, the more you realize, central finance is, a bit of a problem, right? So being able to take that jump into decentralized finance, into kind of an economy where people are, putting the development of the product and the code first above kind of, personal gain. You realize the space is much more, functional for the long term and interesting in that sense to kind of give back to the people a bit as opposed to going into traditional finance, which arguably is good in the sense of money, but you're not getting maybe any personal fulfillment. At least that's how I see it. So
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. Where we saw it in '08, we're seeing it now in kind of crypto. Is most of the time, issues occur with central parties versus like decentralized parties. So, oh wait, it was kind of the major banks in the U.S. got in trouble. The real estate bubble, like the Great Financial Crisis. Now it's kind of the same way with a lot of the, I guess, neobanks we're seeing in crypto or like the exchanges and most. I mean, it's all been like centralized parties other than exploits. So.
right, yeah, for sure. But yeah, that's a that's a whole other topic we could definitely talk about. But yeah, so thanks again for introducing yourself there. Pretty cool background. So did you go to Denver then this year, earlier this year, the FCC rather, or at Denver?
Yeah, so I actually did not, which is funny. I didn't live in Denver until about a month ago. So
Okay.
now I will be here because I'm living here full time, probably for the foreseeable future. So I'm sure I'll be at ETH Denver this year. That's in February, correct?
I believe so. Yeah, end of February.
Yep.
Sweet, awesome. Cool. So yeah, let's. I guess we'll get into then kind of Avalanche then as a network. Maybe do a quick introduction on it for people that haven't used it or heard about it. You know, how can users jump on board, and where can people find more information about it?
Yeah. So to jump on board and find more information, we actually are kind of designing our own ecosystem page that's almost like a full suite of products called Core. And that's a really good starting spot. It's relatively new though, so it might not encompass the whole ecosystem. Generally, if you're looking for DeFi opportunities, DeFi Llama has the top protocols as well as like their yields, and I think it even has a component where it tells you like their safety. But also following the team on Twitter is another way to get great information about protocols that we're excited about. So if you're looking at like DeFi protocols, myself, Luigi, and then there's two other associates named Eric and Nadeem on the DeFi team as well. And then we also have like an NFT, a gaming team, an institutional team, and an enterprise team. So I'd say following most of the Avalabs BD team on Twitter is the best way to find information that's even like before protocols go live. So you can kind of get an inside look of who we're working with, what we're excited about, etc. Um, but like I said, there's a few different avenues, whether they're like analytics pages to find various protocols within our ecosystem, um, core, it's our own wallet, our own ecosystem page, etc. It's a good resource as well. So there's a few different areas that you can look into. Avalanche being EVM compatible also works with like MetaMask. And to get your funds, if you're on Ethereum over, we have an Ethereum bridge, as well as we actually have a Bitcoin bridge as well nowadays, where you can go from native Bitcoin to BTC.B, which is our version of native Bitcoin on chain. And it uses the same Intel SGX technology that the Ethereum bridge uses, except it doubles the amount of wardens that the Ethereum bridge had, which is a good kind of additional security measure. So yeah, that's kind of an inside look of how I would get involved as a new user within the ecosystem, and really trying out um, the blue chip protocols, whether they're in DeFi or NFTs, and as well as there's a few gaming projects that should be coming out here in like the next 3 to 6 months that will be really fun to play as a user.
Awesome, awesome. That sounds really good. So yeah, I mean it's pretty if you've been in DeFi, there's the core bridges and then all the other bridging protocols and it's pretty, I guess, getting more straightforward to transfer over. I know the core bridge too, if you transfer, I believe it's $75, you get a small airdrop, so you can use that for gas as well, which is a big help.
Yep, yeah, that works for both the Bitcoin and the Ethereum bridge. So.
Awesome. Cool. So we'll jump to the next question then. So yeah, for myself, like I've obviously heard about Avalanche, read some about it, but I'm not super familiar. So I think that's a good, you know, a lot of the questions I have, a lot of users might also have. So in terms of, you mentioned that Avalanche is kind of set up like a app chain, kind of like similar to how Cosmos is looking to scale. So how is that being achieved on Avalanche? I know you guys have, I think it's three different chains that run that are performing different transactions. So maybe you just want to touch base on what the different chains are and kind of how they differ from each other.
Yeah, so the primary network consists of three blockchains, and the primary network is actually just like a fancy subnet that everyone within the whole network has to validate. So it consists of the P chain, the C chain, and the X chain, and they all kind of specialize in different areas. So the C chain is that instance of EVM. It's where I guess 98% of users will interact, and it's where most protocols are built on. And then you have X chain, which is a DAG, so it's really made for like high performant kind of transactions, exchanging different tokens, NFTs, etc. And then P chain is the platform chain, which is in charge of like validation, staking, subnet creation, etc. And subnets are actually how we scale horizontally. Those are generally application specific blockchains, but they can be a whole another ecosystem of applications as well, very similar just to their own L1. And the only kind of requirement for those are that they're built using Avalanche consensus, which is our consensus mechanism that was kind of created and founded by our, our founder, whose name is Emin Günsier, and some of his students from Cornell. So he used to be a professor at Cornell. And Avalanche consensus is like I said, the third consensus mechanism ever created, and it uses uh, subsampling to achieve sub-second finality while still being able to scale infinitely. Hopefully, infinitely. Obviously, that's a word that hasn't been tested in with like millions of nodes, but um, hopefully, infinitely a number of nodes that you can have within the system. So classical consensus degrades after around 150 to 200 nodes. Nakamoto consensus, generally it doesn't degrade in terms of number of nodes, but it's relatively slow in terms of transaction finality and blocks being created. So Avalanche consensus really kind of combines the best properties of both. And subnets, like I said, that's like one of the only requirements to build on a subnet is using Avalanche consensus. Subnets are very customizable in nature, so they can use basically any VM that the creator wants. Um, and so whether that's Move VM, a WASM-based VM with like Rust as a language, etc. And we've actually been coming out with very exciting protocol updates. We launched a Rust SDK. We also have we launched an update called BAMF, which allowed for elastic subnets, which essentially means that anyone can come in and permissionlessly validate a subnet that's created. So it's very similar to just being able to come into either like a Cosmos app chain, whether it's like Umi, whether it's Osmosis, etc., and validating one of those. So you can do the same now on Avalanche subnets, where anyone can come in and permissionlessly validate a subnet that's live.
I see. I see. Very cool. So I mean, just going back to the before the subnets, just the standard chain. So users are, obviously just interacting with the one chain, as you mentioned. 99.9% of the transactions are just on that chain. So with the subnets, do users have to change their network on their MetaMask, or they can just continue using the main standard chain, or how does that work?
Yeah, so right now, subnets, you do have to change your network in MetaMask or Core, but I think within Core Wallet, hopefully in a future update, it'll automatically be able to change between subnets, and so it'll be able to tell what protocol a subnet is built on, um, and then it can automatically switch to the subnet that the protocol is using. And we also have native bridging infrastructure. So right now, the subnets that are kind of live on mainnet all use third-party bridges, whether they're like Synapse, Layer Zero, Seller, etc., Axelar. But in the not so distant future, that we'll have our own native transport layer, messaging layer, etc., that should be able to really kind of connect the whole ecosystem.
I see. I see. Very cool. So subnets then, I guess right now can't transfer from each other natively, but in the future they will be able to. And then I guess there are probably bridging mechanisms right now that can transfer between subnets, like Axelar, as you mentioned there, right?
Yep. Yeah. So the subnets generally you could have subnets united together via third-party bridges at this point in time, but they are using third-party or external bridges versus something natively built into the network.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, I had no idea going into this call that you guys were working on that kind of technology. So sounds, I guess, pretty similar to Cosmos in the sense. So in terms of, so each subnet would have its own validator set then?
Yeah, so the one of the main requirements about subnets, especially validation, is that if you're validating a subnet, you also have to be validating the primary network. But each subnet generally will have their own validator set. But of course, a validator could be validating multiple subnets if their hardware requirements like meet the standards where their machine could handle doing that.
I see. I see. Interesting. So I know Cosmos right now is working on the idea of shared security or the main network being able to secure subnets. Is that also something that you guys are looking to in the future, or how are you guys going to handle the scalability, I guess, of validators? If you have 100 subnets running, are these subnets just expected to all run their own validators, or people that are interested in validating for these networks are going to have a bunch of different, pieces of hardware in order to facilitate that?
Yeah, so the hope is having like a validator marketplace in which subnets, the creators of the subnets can come in and say like, basically have like their own advertisement saying like, hey, validate our subnet. Here's the rewards. Here's like what our subnet is specialized towards, like with protocols being built on top of it, etc. So I hope that it blossoms into kind of a validator economy for subnets in which you have a marketplace that attracts new validators towards subnets that are in need of validation. So I know Cosmos is building like a shared security model because of like economic incentives. Generally, when you launch a new chain, especially a new token, obviously the market cap might be relatively low, and might be too easy to take kind of majority control of a blockchain. And so they're using a shared security model with like the Atom token and validators to help kind of bootstrap security for new chains. So that's kind of a rundown. And what I generally recommend for teams building within our ecosystem is to launch as sort of a proof of authority subnet, meaning a closed environment and not permissionless in nature in terms of validation. So not having elastic subnets enabled. And then once you reach a certain threshold of number of validators, something like, I don't know, 20, then you can go to more permissionless in nature in which anyone can come in and validate their subnet.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think, just to mention, people always get a little hung up on things not being decentralized, but it's always easier to start a bit more centralized and add on decentralization as you go. So,
Yeah, exactly. And I think everything has almost every chain at this point has a point of centralization, whether they're L2s with the sequencer, whether it's what is it like the RPCs on Ethereum, or like being able to kind of centrally work together to censor certain blocks, whether they're being like OFAC compliant. So um, I think there's always, and not always, but I think it's kind of a spectrum of decentralization, if you will, rather than being like, hey, this is truly centralized versus not. Like, it's not like a light switch. It's not a 0 to 1 moment. It's definitely a gray component in there, or a spectrum, if you will.
right, right, for sure. And I mean, some things may run better as a centralized approach. There's some things you don't really need to decentralize. So yeah, no, I think that's interesting. So, can anyone? So, if someone's interested in running a validator, validating these subnets, how can they get involved in doing that?
Yeah. So some subnets, like I was saying, are permissionless in nature and validation. Others are not. The first requirement is you have to be validating the primary network, which anyone can do. There's certain minimum thresholds with like hardware requirements, as well as you need 2,000 of Vox staked to be able to be a validator. But those are the only two requirements. And then in terms of validating subnets, if a subnet is elastic, meaning it's permissionless in nature for validation, then they just need whatever requirements that subnet has in order to validate their subnet.
I see, I see. So, in terms of validating the main net, so 2,000 evacs, and then is this something that can run on like a Raspberry Pi, or do you need, more robust, node hardware, kind of like DApp nodes, or What are the, I guess, hardware requirements for that?
Yeah, now you got me looking at our docs. Give me one sec. So here in our docs, and I know sometimes this gets updated, but our minimum recommended requirements are um, so a CPU that's equivalent of 8 AWS vCPU, 16 gigs of RAM, a terabyte of storage, and then an operating system that's Ubuntu or Mac OS. So that's kind of, I guess I used to build, because I was like, I'm a video gamer. So I used to build a decent bit of computers. And so I think that would probably cost like, I don't know, $500 to $600 to build, maybe even less than that. So nothing that's like gonna really hurt financially.
Right, right. And then, of course, I imagine this is scaling up, as the blockchain gets larger, you're going to need more storage space as it goes on.
Yeah, and like certain subnets also that want to be very highly performant might really need some spec'd out validators. So that's actually something that is good to talk about now that we're on that subject is um, so Polkadot, the model they use in terms of like their parachains is like kind of a standardized validator set in terms of like hardware requirements because the validators are constantly switching. I think in what like is it a half hour windows? I'll have to do a little bit of refreshing my memory. But that's why they have to have uniform validators because they're constantly switching which parachain they're validating. Versus with us, if a subnet needs to be highly performant in terms of like, I don't know, having millions of transactions for gaming or like high frequency trading on it happening within like a financial subnet, then you can have really beefy validators in terms of like hardware requirements, and that's completely fine as long as you're continuing to validate the primary network.
Gotcha. So yeah, just to jump back a bit, like how many, I guess, subnets are live right now, or like what are the biggest ones that are ongoing at this time?
Yeah, so it's super interesting because we actually have uh, probably like 4 or 5 live on mainnet, but the main 2 commercial facing ones that people focus upon are, Krabata and DFK. But there are a few that are definitely kind of, um, under, like under wraps that don't necessarily wanna be as public and don't have, like, public explorers, etcetera, on mainnet. Um, as well as we should see, I don't know, 2 or 3 launch hopefully within the next few months as well. One being Dexalot, which is a central limit order book being launched on their own subnet. Another being Intane, which is kind of an institutional subnet that does like mortgage-backed secure or like structured finance products on chain, and they work with like kind of large traditional banks, both on the administration and tokenization side of those structured finance products. So like asset-backed securities, mortgage-backed securities, et cetera, all like bundled together into a product.
Interesting. Very cool. Very cool. So yeah, I'm not sure if we have any devs here, but if someone's interested in getting involved in creating a subnet, do you guys have like a SDK or robust docs for creating this kind of thing right now?
Yeah, so we have an SDK with a CLI as well, and hopefully many SDKs coming out related to like subnets in like the next, I don't know, 6 months to a year. Um, so exactly, it should all be within the docs as well as the SDK. And right now, it actually, if you want to deploy on a subnet on testnet, it takes like 25 seconds. Like it's very quick.
Well, that's awesome. So yeah, so I guess when did the first subnet launch, or is this something that's pretty recent, or this is you guys have had this going for over a year or whatever? Because yeah, like I said, this is the first time kind of delving a bit more into Avalanche since a couple of years back. So for me, it's kind of new to hear about this technology that you guys are working on.
Yeah. Sorry, what was the question exactly again?
Yeah, just how long have subnets been around, or like when was the first one launched?
Okay, yeah, so the first one was launched actually the beginning of like this year, so the beginning of 2020. and it really launched in a very manual and like permissioned manner. But I think it really just takes time to build out SDKs, dev tooling, etc., and like automated processes so that it's easier in the future. So, for instance, I think Cosmos first launched, or at least was an idea as early as like 2015, 2014. So they've had quite a bit of years to really build out their tooling infrastructure. Versus we were kind of in the idea phase in like 2018, 2019, and launched on mainnet. I think late 2020, early 2021, we launched mainnet. And so we haven't been around for nearly as long as something like a Cosmos, who's has all of the dev tooling kind of already down. So I think hopefully within like the next year, we'll have a robust dev toolkit, SDK, etc., to really help with the developer experience.
Right, right. Yeah, no, for sure. It takes a long time, especially if you're, creating a toolkit for different languages, right? So, yeah, you obviously want to be able to support as much as possible, but and every protocol is kind of going to have different needs, and they might want to focus on privacy or whatever non-EVM stuff as well. So, is that also something that a subnet can? I guess you had mentioned WASM, so you can do non-EVM network subnets as well. Then I imagine.
Yeah, it could be WASM, Move VM. It could be you can even have like a Solana VM subnet. It could really be anything. So
That's interesting for sure. And then to see how these, I guess, if these subnets are going to bridge together with these different consensus mechanisms is going to be interesting. So you had mentioned you guys are working on kind of like a standardized bridging between these subnets as well.
yeah, so exactly, kind of an infrastructure layer regarding transport and messaging.
That's very cool. I think that's I mean, I hate to keep referencing Cosmos, but I mean, I have a lot of knowledge of Cosmos too, so it's very similar, I guess, to the IBC. But in the same sense, for myself, there's a lot of struggles that EVM chains are having right now. Ethereum's having with scalability. So, the Cosmos ecosystem has always been interesting in the sense of how they're looking to, actually solve scalability. So, to me, I think they at least from the technical side, it seems like that's the best option, and Vitalik even references a lot of that in his white paper. So to me, that's very cool that you guys are kind of on the same pathway or understanding to how you're gonna scale and stay relevant, right? So and that can kind of lead us into the next question is how do you stay relevant as a layer one? All these layer twos are coming online, and there's kind of a, I guess, a threat to the layer one ecosystem. What's the what's the point of using layer one when you can just use a layer two scaling solution if that's like where all these large protocols are launching? So I guess how do you stay competitive, and how do you continue to scale?
Yeah, so it's all about having a strong native ecosystem, whether it's protocols, developers, users, and really differentiating yourself. I think people care less about what the underlying chain or technology they're using is built on top of, and more they care about whatever protocol or like front end they're using, as long as like the blockchain or the technology it's built on has certain performant performance requirements, like it meets a minimum threshold. And I think a lot of our technology, it's very novel and kind of exclusive to Avalanche. So like in highly financial transactions, sub-second finality, you can't have you can't have thousands of pending transactions when like an FTX situation happened. I think I saw at one point Ethereum mainnet had 85,000 pending transactions, and like a few other
Jeez.
chains that yeah, a few other chains that I monitor had like over a couple thousand, and we had at max pending 5, and that's because of blocks being finalized and on demand and sub-second finality. I think our finality is generally around like 600 MS, which is just kind of absurd in relation to other chains. I think Solana's is like 6 or 7 seconds. Same with like the whole Cosmos ecosystem that uses Tendermint. Polygon uses like an iteration of Tendermint called Peppermint, so it's around the same finality. But generally, you have some block reorgs within Polygon as well. So I
Mm-hmm,
think
mm-hmm.
our technology kind of speaks for itself, and it being probably the best in terms of like uh, being used for DeFi or highly financialized transactions that need a really kind of tech heavy blockchain. And so that's kind of what we've seen the past year where DeFi tends to gravitate towards Avalanche. So right now, I think in terms of like native DeFi applications being built, a lot of builders are really looking into like us and Arbitrum. And right now, from what I've heard personally, is like a lot of the most interesting conversation in terms of like native DeFi and DeFi being built at this point in time is being built on Avalanche because of that kind of highly technical blockchain that has a lot of kind of specs that make it very attractive for both users and developers. Um, so I think, like I said, that was kind of a long-winded way of saying you have to really capitalize on your strengths, both from a tech standpoint as well as a protocol standpoint, a developer standpoint, a user standpoint. Because at the end of the day, as long as I don't know, there's 5 or 6 different chains, whether they're L1s or L2s, and they all have very similar experience. People don't really care about the underlying technology. Um, Especially, I mean, it depends on the person. If it's just kind of your average retail user, they might not care. But if it's your more kind of savvy or savvy user or like institution, they're gonna care about, I guess, being front run, being able to get transactions finalized, like uptime of the chain, diversification of validators, etc. Stuff that matters that um, might not matter to other people. So
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. In the future, we're likely not even gonna, to get mass adoption, you kind of have to have the retail user, not even worrying about which network they're performing the transaction on, just that they're getting the best price or the fastest, validation, whatever their choices are for their preference. Um, so no, I think that's a really good point. So just a question on in terms of how you guys have such quick validation, is that done through the DAG chain then?
so that's actually because of Avalanche consensus. So it's not actually even because of the DAG chain, but it's because we essentially created the most performant consensus mechanism ever. Um, so hopefully it can continue to scale. Right now we have around uh, I guess what is it, 1,350 validators, and we got up to around I think 1,700 at one point in time, and we saw no network degradation. So Avalanche consensus is really one of a kind in that nature.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Good amount of validators for such high finality, and I think that's something that's not really talked a lot about right now. I know there's some discussion about it, but as you mentioned, Polygon struggles with block reorgs, and if you ever transfer to a centralized exchange, you'll see you're waiting, 300, 500 uh, block approvals before your funds finally get released because they have to be worried about, block reorgs.
Exactly. So I think, I mean, your average user might not care about stuff like that, but BlackRock, Jane Street, all of the large traditional finance clients are going to care. So.
Oh, for sure. Okay, cool. So I guess so because I guess the subnets are going to be performant on the main chain because the validators also have to validate on the main chain. Do you see that as being an issue with scalability, or it's not something that's a problem?
So you said the subnets have to also, so the subnet validators also have to validate the primary network. Where would be the
Yeah,
issue with
so
scalability?
like if the main chain, for instance, gets too large, or like because I know like with Solana, for example, as the blockchain increased in size, the validator requirements continued to go up. So is that going to be something that's a problem with Avalanche, or is there going to be an instance of like forking the main chain so that the hardware requirements or space requirements just don't continue to, go up into infinity?
Yeah, so I think state bloat in general it's kind of a very focused upon topic in blockchain in general. Uh, so Ethereum mainnet, obviously, they've been talking. What is it? They have the all of the not acronyms, but the surge, the verge, the merge, whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think yeah, it gets confusing at times because they all rhyme. But I think one of them is essentially like state deletion, where they tear out part of the state that might not matter anymore, and essentially just like wipe it out so that validators it doesn't get kind of outrageous to validate it. And so I could see a world where we have like certain state that's not needed anymore being deleted, as well as we don't really have quite as much state bloat on the primary network as something like Solana, because Solana is so cheap in terms of transactions, and I think that's what you see. It's a twofold problem where if you have a chain that's too cheap, you could have uh, times of high congestion, which causes the chain to go down, but also state bloat. And so I think hopefully our engineers can continue to optimize over time to ensure that state bloat doesn't occur. And if there is something that's really causing a lot of state and transactions and congestion on the C chain, it kind of builds their own subnet, and that's that horizontal scaling really happening in real time. And that's what we saw with like Krobata. They were accounting for like I don't know, I think it was something crazy like 65% of transactions on C chain, and C chain gas fees were going up. So they built their own subnet, and essentially gas fees went completely down to where they were like I don't know in May of 2021 or something crazy, or August of 2021.
Right, right. No, that's good. I mean, it seems like you guys have a strong, robust, developer base. So it'll be interesting to see, how things develop there. But yeah, I mean, every blockchain kind of is dealing with the same issues as you mentioned. So in the sense that you're independent from everyone else, it's kind of nice that everyone's working to solve the same issues. So it just depends how you're going to solve it, I suppose. Each blockchain has different options and different methodologies for dealing with that. So
Exactly. Exactly.
sweet. Well, I think we pretty much answered everything. Maybe we just want to give a brief summary or conclusion as to what's coming up next. Maybe you want to share just a quick kind of development roadmap for what people can get excited about Avalanche over the next year here.
Yeah, so I think since the white paper first dropped in when was that? Probably 2018, it's always been on the roadmap to have subnets, to have native infrastructure like a transport and messaging layer, etc. And I think BAMF, that upgrade, allowing for elastic subnets or permissionless validation of subnet was really one step closer to kind of the end goal for the roadmap. But the next is probably the internal name right now is called Teleporter for that messaging and transport
Oh,
layer.
cool.
Yeah, and so that'll hopefully be coming out sometime in mid 2023, maybe like April. That'd be my guess. And that's probably the next super large protocol update. And then after that, I'm sure there'll be a lot of kind of um, efficiency upgrades in terms of like state load, like I was saying, for the primary network, and kind of other upgrades regarding like the subnet SDKs, multiple VMs, multiple languages, to really ensure a very smooth developer, I guess, ecosystem and tooling experience for anyone that wants to build a subnet. And then for more of a, I guess, application specific layer, um, we have a variety of, I guess, protocols building. Our institutional subnet, like I talked about a little bit, goes live. It's actually, I think, going live on testnet sometime in the next 2 weeks, and that's a subnet that it has KYC and compliance built into the validator level. And so anyone that wants to either build an application or be a user of that subnet will have to be KYC'd and compliant. And generally, it's aimed at institutions and kind of highly financialized DeFi applications. And so that'll go live on testnet hopefully in the next 2 weeks, and then go live on mainnet sometime in quarter 1 of 2023 as well. And that's super exciting because we'll be working with a variety of institutions, hopefully even some banks and whatnot, to really get them on chain and really using kind of the first instances that they've been able to for DeFi because it's fully regulatory compliant and KYC'd. Um, in terms of some other applications or like DeFi protocols that I'm super excited for, Trader Joe liquidity book, so the V2 of that decentralized exchange just went live last week on mainnet, and it started with like stable pairs, but it actually happened to go live with volatile pairs today, and that's very similar to like Uni V3 with concentrated liquidity. But in terms of differences, it doesn't use NFTs for the positions; it uses actually ERCs. And so it's very composable in nature, and it's very it's something that developers can build on top of and have second order effects of DeFi. Once you have these like very developer friendly protocols, especially now that we're seeing like every vertical of DeFi be covered within the Avalanche ecosystem, once we get a few native options protocols that are launching soon, launched on mainnet, then I think every vertical of DeFi will be covered, and you'll see those second order effects of protocols being built on top of base layers, base layer applications, I guess I would call it, and really allow for very creative DeFi applications to take place. Probably go on for like, I don't know, an hour plus of different protocols that I talk to and that are building here. About like what I'm really excited for. So I know we're running up on time. I think we had an hour, so around 1 is probably when we'll have to hop off. So I want to leave a few minutes for questions if that's cool.
Yeah, yeah, of course, you bet. Yeah, no, that sounds great. I think that's a good summary of what's upcoming, and people can always go and check out, follow the social medias and learn more about the protocols and what each protocol is obviously working on their own roadmap. So there's lots upcoming. But yeah, no, I think just in summary, I was surprised to kind of see, I expect that a network's doing development, but it seems like you guys are, doing quite a bit and you have pretty, robust goals with what you're looking to achieve. And I'm interested in kind of how you guys are looking at, how much effort you guys have put into thinking about scalability and the future, of your layer one. So I think Avalanche is one to look at for a lot of people. If like myself, you haven't done a lot of research in a long time, or you're looking for another network to play around on, check out the DeFi. Check out Avalanche. Definitely, I'm going to do the same. And again, we do have our Quest campaign going, and you can earn some US dollars and some other perks as well by using Furu Combo on Avalanche, which launched about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago here. So definitely check that out as well. And then we'll see if we have any questions come in. But thank you very much, Matt, for taking the time and to share all your information. From someone who's maybe not, I mean, I guess you said you had delved a little bit into technicals, but it seems like you have a really good understanding of your network and just how, networks are being run in general. So you've done a lot of research. It sounds like just for just being in crypto for a couple of years. So
Yeah, I'm a nerd first, and I really like to read and whatnot. And so I remember one time just like reading through. I think it was actually Celestia's white paper like a year ago at like 10:30 at night, just for fun. So just stuff like that. I think you have to be interested in like the technology behind it and come up with your own like theses in order to kind of be successful and understand how everything works.
Yeah, definitely. Doing your own research, technically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sweet, sweet. Well, we'll see if anything comes in. I mean, do you have any closing thoughts or anything you want to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I guess because there might be some people from the Avalanche side that follow me that are in here as a listener, you want to give like a short, I guess like elevator pitch or TLDR of what Foro Combo is and like how you guys how the protocol works and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, of course, you bet. So yeah, I mean, FuruCombo is kind of it's a DeFi aggregator. So basically, we integrate protocols into our front end, and then it allows people to just drag and drop cubes to create transactions. So, for example, on Avalanche, we have right now we just have Paraswap and Aave, but you can do any action on Aave or Paraswap that you could do on their front end interface. So, for example, you could drag in a deposit cube from Aave, and then you could add a borrow cube and maybe like a couple swap tokens after that on to maybe do some swaps on the funds that you borrowed from Aave. And you can execute that all within one transaction from the front end. The cool thing about FruCombo is it also integrates the flash loan feature from Aave. So you can do flash loan transactions that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do, directly on Aave or from other websites. So, for example, a lot of people think of flash loans. They think of the flash loan arbitrage, or how am I going to make money? But our biggest feature there, that is possible to use flash loans to get arbitrage, but it can be difficult. So our biggest feature or function of using the flash loan is to kind of manage your funds. So you could do collateral or debt swaps using flash loans to provide those funds and then switch them out. Or you could use the biggest one is the self liquidation. So if you have funds in Aave and you're, getting up on your health factor and you need to, you're at risk of being liquidated, you can borrow those funds to pay back your principal. Of course, or pay back. Yeah, of course, your borrowed funds from Aave are going to be less than what you deposited. So because you're flash loaning and then receiving back your principal from paying back your borrowed funds, you receive back some extra funds that can be used to pay back the flash loan. So basically, say you had 10 Ethereum deposited into Aave and you've borrowed seven, but now that seven is in somewhere else and you don't have access to those funds. Instead of coming up with seven Ethereum, maybe withdrawing your stake balance elsewhere, you can just flash loan those seven Ethereum, pay back your funds, and now you have 10, seven of which will be used to pay back the flash loan, and then you get back the rest of your principal, which is three. So that's one of the most unique features of FuruCombo right now on the Avalanche chain is being able to use that flash loan function. But of course, other networks have more protocols integrated, and as more protocols get integrated, it kind of increases the composability. So that's our main product. That's kind of what we're creating right now is that ability to, be a DeFi aggregator and provide that composability for all these different platforms on the front end.
Awesome, thank you for that. Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure that um, if any of our users or any ecosystem participants were here, they really had a better understanding of what you guys are building. So, yeah, doesn't look like we have any questions. I'll let if anyone does want to hop up here. I know we have another minute or two, but I'll probably peace out. Let me check. I might have a meeting at 1. So actually, I'm good. So if anyone does have any questions, feel free to hop up during the next minute or two.
Yeah, and definitely you can message us on Twitter or join us on the Discord and ask your question there. Definitely help happy. I'm sure everyone's happy to answer that there as well. But no, yeah, thanks for reminding me to provide a summary of Furu Combo. Not everyone's our user here, so it can be a little confusing or daunting. But yeah, we have docs, we have a team to help people with anything that they need. So yeah, definitely check us out and definitely check out the Avalanche ecosystem as well. So I think we'll call it here. But yeah, any questions, definitely feel free to reach out. So thank you very much, Matt, for coming on here and providing your insight. We'll have to have you back on maybe in the future to discuss something again. Typically, we run the FuruRadio in a kind of a discussion podcast format where we got 3, 4, 5 guests on to kind of discuss a topic. So maybe we can have you on for something in the future, scalability or bridges or whatever. And yeah, because I think you have some interesting insights. So
Yeah, that's my favorite is to have discussions and kind of group panels versus me just blabbing for an hour or something. So
right on. So well, thanks again, Matt. And we'll see everyone at the next one. Thanks for attending.
yep, thank you as well. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Bye, everyone.